The 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund released its 20th anniversary report earlier this week. The report shows more than $8 billion have been awarded to families and victims of the September 11th attacks over the past 2 decades. It also found that the number of people filing claims with the fund dramatically increased in 2011. That's the year when former President Obama signed the James Zardroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act, which expanded and extended eligibility for victims seeking financial assistance. For more, I want to bring in civil litigation attorney Hugh Campbell. He's a partner at Rodman & Campbell and also served as a member of the board of directors of Trial Lawyers Care, a nonprofit organization that provides free legal services to victims of the 9/11 attacks. Hugh, thank you for being here. So tell us, what legal problems continue to plague victims and the families of victims even to this day?
Thank you for having me. Some of the problems that the victims are still experiencing is getting the medical resources they need to actually recover from the 9/11 injuries that they suffered, and also to get the financial resources that they need in order to cover their day-to-day expenses.
Well, the deadline to apply for funds was extended, and as I mentioned in the intro, that led to new claims being made. It has since expired again this past summer. Do you think that everybody who was eligible to compensation that needed assistance has now been provided for, or does that window need to open again?
Well, I think the window needs to open again, because I think that some individuals were so badly injured, they were actually in denial and did not accept the fact that they needed assistance from the fund. And I think that it should be extended so as to give those individuals an opportunity to apply for the fund and to benefit from the fund.
And is Trial Lawyers Care continuing to work on that issue with families and victims?
Well, Trial Lawyers Care is still working on that in the background. In essence, Trial Lawyers Care was instrumental in formulating and bringing about fighting for the Victims' Compensation Fund in its initial stage. And we have actually been very vigilant over the years to make sure that the fund was adequately managed and funded in order to provide for the families of the 9/11 tragedy.
And we understand you have counseled more than 4,000 families who applied for assistance. You launched actually just 10 days after the September 11th attacks. As we're now looking at the 20th anniversary, what does this mean to you, and what work do you feel most proud of, and what work still needs to be done?
Well, I think we're very proud of the fact that the trial lawyers across the country, not only in New York State, New Jersey, and Connecticut, but the trial lawyers across the country stepped up and actually decided to provide free legal services for all the victims and their families of 9/11. And I will say that that was a pretty big thing that we did, because here, as a national organization, leadership had to tell its members that you did not have the ability to bring lawsuits, because trial lawyers would provide pro bono work on behalf of the family. I think that was something very telling for the trial lawyers across the country, because we had members traveling to New York City from across the country, rendering free legal services for families, consulting with families. And these are individuals that traveled in, stayed at hotels at their own cost and expense, and represented families to recover a tremendous amount of money, and never actually charged anything for those services. And I think that's something that we were very proud of.
As you have reason to be. I want to ask you about another aspect of the Victims' Compensation Fund. Those who accept money actually agree to a non-negotiable provision that does not allow them to sue the airlines involved in the attacks. Tell us a little bit about the reasoning behind this, and is this provision well accepted by the families and victims?
Well, it is accepted by some families, and most naturally there are other families that do not accept that proposition. But I will say that that was a result of very extensive negotiations between members of Congress, different organization interest groups, because I think in the initial stage, it was very obvious that there would have been widespread immunity for these airlines and other entities involved. And I think trial lawyers was at the forefront to say, no, you could not provide immunity and not provide compensation. So I think the middle of the road was to develop the Victims' Compensation Fund. And I think that's how we are where we are today. And yes, if indeed you agreed to participate in the Victims' Compensation Fund, you could not sue certain entities because you basically waive those rights.
I understand. Hugh Campbell, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for bringing us up to date on where things currently stand. Appreciate that.
And thank you for having me.